It can't be that dangerous to climb these peaks because I'm still here. There are no typical days in the mountains. There's a huge variety, and I've guided skiing and rock climbing on sunny buttresses in t-shirts, and I've guided 8,000 meter peaks in down suits, so there's not really a typical day. I don't think it gets any easier the more you do. Every trip is challenging, and if anything, it's a physical endeavor, and as you age, that gets older, and I'm past the prime. So from that regard, it gets more difficult. You could maybe say it gets more comfortable. I mean, our last trip to Nepal in November was extremely comfortable. Everybody knew what they were doing, and that came, I think, just from exposure and having done it before. I've guided on every continent in the planet, including Antarctica a couple of times. But I do go back to Nepal again and again. It's easy, it's comfortable, it's beautiful. It's cool in a lot of different reasons, culturally and aesthetically with the mountains. And it's someplace that people like to go to, so there's always work there to be done. I've climbed a bunch of 8,000 meter peaks in the Himalayas, and in the Himalayas, people talk about the 8,000 meter peaks like here in Colorado, we talk about the 14,000 foot peaks. And I've done 5 of those, including an early ascent of K2 without oxygen, a couple of ascents of Everest, the first American ascent of Manaslu, Gasherbrum 2 I guided, as well as Cho-Oyu in Tibet. If you're climbing a mountain, I've always ascribed to the view that that's only halfway there. A lot of folks have gotten into trouble on descents after they've given their all to get to the top of something gnarly. And in my mind, it ain't over till you're back home at the trailhead or the car or the lodge or whatever it is, but back home safe again. I bring all my clients home. I bring all my friends home. I mean, that's, goal number 1 is to return safely, 10 fingers and 10 toes. Rule number 2 is to like each other when you get home. So I think I've been pretty lucky at both of those. As a guide, I feel that I don't work for the client. I work for the client's wife or mom. So I don't want to ever have to make that call if something goes wrong. So my ultimate responsibility is to show the client a good, fun time, but in a safe and a controlled way. Himalayan mountaineering has changed over the course of the years. I've summited 8,000 meter peaks in the 90s, in the 0s, and the 10s. And so over that period of time, just like the rest of the world, there's been a ton of changes. It used to be you'd get a permit and you'd meet people from all over the world, and there'd just be maybe a dozen of you or 20 of you. And now there can be hundreds of people in a base camp. Everest hasn't just become popular in the last couple of years. Everest has always been popular. Once it was tagged as the highest point on the planet, it became popular and the focus of attention. And then, when Tibet, all the approaches were first for Tibet because Nepal was closed and Nepal got open. So politics have played a role to it too. So it's been a little mysterious to get to it and hard to get to it, quote unquote. So I think Everest, just because of it being the big kahuna, has always had attention and focus. It's what I call the ultimate cocktail peak. If I'm at a cocktail party and tell you, I'm going to Everest in May, that means something to you. If I told you I'm going to Gasherbrum 4 or Shivling, to a climber that would mean something, but to the mass of humanity, they're not going to know Gasherbrum 4. It's a much harder climb, but Everest has got the biggest reputation. Mountaineering is getting more and more into the mainstream by guys like with COORS ads or Toyota commercials or something. But I think there's still the overall view is that it's kind of sketchy and dangerous, and why would you ever want to leave the couch to do that? And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's a worthy pursuit and can be done safely and well. A couple years ago, there was a huge magnitude earthquake in Nepal, and we happened to be at Camp 1 on Everest at that time, in what's called the Western Coombe. It's on the top of the Khumbu Icefall that many people might know. When it occurred, if you could imagine, there's big fins of ice, and when the earth shook, those fins wobbled, and it was like being on a porch swing, literally getting that much movement out of the snow that we were inside a tent, inside a 2-man tent, and it was moving like your porch swing. And as a friend of mine said, it took a while before our imaginations realized it was an earthquake, because our first reaction is in the mountains is, oh, it's an avalanche. But this was much more than that. This was a natural disaster on a huge scale. And we were lucky, but our base camp was in the way of a massive avalanche that came roaring down from another mountain across the valley from Everest, and it wiped out 5 of our crew in base camp, killed them. And then, of course, the whole country is devastated, buildings falling down, so it turned into really much more of a humanitarian crisis than a mountaineering escapade. Neil Young once said, "I don't play guitar because I want to, I play guitar because I have to." So I don't rock climb and mountaineer and ice climb and ski. I think there's a little bit of both. It's not so much I have to, I definitely like it and I want to, but there's a little bit of have to in there as well.